85th anniversary that we're actually having the groundbreaking. You know, it's been a long time, and one thing about it, for people to stick with something this long is awesome. And I didn't find out till today that my classmate at Brazoswood, who we actually went to the prom together, she probably won't admit it.
Tell everybody that.
That was a long time ago. Her dad, George Kramig, who I knew because we were raised in Clute together, right at the, she was on one end of the street and I was on the other end. And so, you know, knowing her dad and Mr. Hickey were the folks who originally got this started, and knowing those folks is really great. I would like to say thank you to Mayor Davison and all the council members of Surfside. They have really stuck behind this project. I'd also like to thank Texas Parks and Wildlife for the grants that they've given us. And hopefully we'll be getting some more grants in the future. And if I can help you with that, I do happen to know the executive director.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Yay.
And most importantly, I'd like to thank the old Velasco Surfside Historical Beach Committee. Their dedication, as I said earlier, for everything they've done. And it was really interesting to hear the history earlier. Absolutely. And again, thank y'all for being here. I would like to thank Sandra Shaw for being here, the Executive Director of the Brazoria Chamber, and Port Commissioner Ravi Sananya for attending. Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
When I first became mayor over 20 years ago, my God, one of the first people that came to see me was her father. And he had this deal, they were doing this Thunder on the Brazos event, and it was disastrous because it was 120 degrees out there every time they did it. It either rained, it was full of mosquitoes, you know, it barely broke even, but it really brought attention, and they were determined to bring attention to Fort Velasco. We had to stop that event because we were losing more money than we made some money, maybe $25,000, but the people that were founding it it was falling apart, it was hard. So we would look for other avenues, and these guys kept the spirit alive, and we're still here because of that. It's interesting that they talk about these grants, because I want to tell you, one of my frustrations early in this, during the first 10 years, is there's no historical grants for rebuilding forts. We looked everywhere. It was to Peggy's ingenuity to make a trail go through it, to make it an element of a trail, and Parks and Wildlife goes, well, it's a trail grant. We got lots of those. So if anybody asks you, the Fort Velasco is an element of our trail grant, and we're excited that they agreed to that concept. And I think one of the problems with forts is Texas Parks and Wildlife doesn't want to be maintaining these things for years, and so we've got, with partnerships with the county and the city, this project is, you know, really underway, and the efforts of within the committee. Where's Ron? I saw him earlier. Mr. Grant, his wife, who was a driving force for two. I have a lot to do as the mayor. It doesn't seem like it that I do that, but the problem is these guys are always nipping at your tail, because there's nobody calling me saying, how come you're not working on the fort? And these guys, they want to know why the water's not running, why the police aren't there, why the beach isn't clean. But these guys are nipping my tail about this damn fort for 20 years. So, yeah, there you go. And I must tell you, without their persistence, it would have seemed like a very minor, because Mr. Kramig, who was their leader when he passed, and as he got older, he was less persistent, and I thought I was free, but this committee came along. And that's why this thing takes a long time, because there really wasn't the money, and there needed to be the passion, and they had the passion to make it important to me, because there's so many other things that are important to everybody that lives here that's more important than the fort. But it's important to people, after hearing a story like this, how important it is to remember that stuff. Early on, when Mr. Kramig had told me it's in this area, and the Conservancy was a very small group then, and they had little pieces of land, and they were getting little pieces of land. They're very large now, and the great things they do for Brazoria County. This land became available over there, and they didn't have any money. They were beggars. They were getting stuff donated to them by good citizens, and the property became available next door here. And I said, well, we can get a grant from GLO, CMP grant. You know, I was grant happy, and we wanted the land, and it became sale, and the people wanted 60 or 80,000. We said, well, the only problem is if you sell it, we're going to condemn it because we want it, we need it. And we're going to get it by eminent domain, which now is a terrible word, and probably was a terrible word then. And so we began negotiating, got a price, bought the land, and we held it for a long time. But what it really did And, you know, we had other plans from the beginning. It tied together the land that the Conservancy had around there that they couldn't afford to buy because it was owned by 16 people and they wanted money. They didn't want to feel good about donating it to anybody. We got the land, and that along with the plan that we created that used to be on the wall here for a long time, that tied the boat ramp to the jetty park to the fort, really made for a nice municipal area. And I'm excited that these guys pushed me, because without pushing me, I can guarantee you it wouldn't have been on my energy, because there were so many other things to do. But it takes people with passion to make people that can, like Dude and myself, that can make things like this happen. But if there's not somebody passionate behind you forcing you to do it, you do the things that people demand every day, which is water and safety and stuff like that. So I respect you guys for that, for the perseverance to push me to it. I'm not the hero here. I'm only the guy standing up here because there were people behind me pushing me to do this stuff, okay? Not that I don't believe in it. It's just that it's a difficult thing to do, and it was frustrating during the first 10 years when there was no money anywhere. Everybody laughed about a fort. These guys never gave up. You know, I was up and down on all along. But this thing really looks like it's going to happen now, and I'm proud of you guys for sticking in there and doing it. And especially Ron's wife, who's not here with us today. She was one of the meanest, and she was. I think she'd appreciate that and wouldn't disagree with me, because she never let me get my guard down. So everything's great, and I'm happy to be here today. I'm impressed with this event. You know, I'm a pessimist when it comes to stuff like this, because it's hard to get people to come out here and get passionate about this, but this has been great. The people that came, everything has turned out beautiful. If they had asked me to plan this, I'd say you're out of your mind, but Dorothy, you pulled it off. It's great. The same way you keep pulling off the dinner. Congrats to all you guys on the committee and stuff like that. I usually don't talk this much.
Was Jan even meaner than me?
Huh?
Was Jan even meaner than
The
me?
two of y'all were dogs after me. I can say that because she's not here. And I can outrun Ronnie, but you're sitting up too close.
You can probably outrun her.
Yeah, but she's close enough. But thanks for coming today. It's been exciting, and things are going to really start happening pretty soon. I mean, they've started, but you're really going to see some changes soon. That's all I got.
Sure. Hey, well, I just want to say thank you, really thank you for all the people that have gotten this going and kept this going, because my dad was compassionate and very, very much interested in this. I can remember him researching and writing and scribbling and getting all this stuff before Google and all that kind of stuff, you know, and have my mom behind the scenes helping him and typing on her little thing, and him just going just full throttle on it. And I can remember him setting up somehow getting with this group, setting up some cassette tapes and getting pictures drawn, and him playing those, and going to the fairgrounds with that exhibit, taking that exhibit to the fairgrounds, and then he would take that, I think it was the beginning of the Mosquito Festival, he'd take that, wherever he could, he would take that diorama that he was part of, the original one, getting that going, and then the cassette tape of the men, and he had some special people hired to do that, and they were real excited, and the pictures, and he was just, he respected them and had compassion for them and was just so interested in it. And he talked of a dream of having this built and having something for Fort Velasco, and he even talked, and I know we've talked about this, something about some actors and getting a play written and having it played out. And I hear that that's somewhere, but anyway, I've got books that he's written and typed and scratched on, and I've passed on a lot of that, and I feel my dad would be very happy, very, very happy that you've kept on working on this. It meant a lot to him, and he was a go-getter, and projects were his thing, but he put his heart and soul into it, and I feel him right here, and I thank you.
Well, I'm kind of a newcomer. I've never lived in Surfside. This is my stomping ground when I was growing up. I'm a native Freeporter. I was born there, and I don't mind telling you, 95 years ago. I've seen lots I've seen many things happen in this area. Speaking of George, many years ago, it was back in the 1940s, right across the river at Dow Chemical, George and I sat many hours talking about Fort Velasco. At that time, there was never a committee. As far as I ever knew, George was the committee. And if you ever wanted to know anything about Velasco, call George. I don't, the background in this area here, I can tell you one thing interesting about Surfside. When I was growing up, we used to like to come to the beach. That was a big thing. The only problem, the only way to get to Surfside was across the pontoon bridge. Many of you don't remember that. I do. It was real interesting. They would take you across to Surfside. You could stay as long as you wanted to stay, but it cost you 50 cents to get back. So you can see the politicians were busy at work even then. I've spent many an hours down here. It's almost like a second home to me. One other thing I'd like to mention, a lot of people are not aware of, the river which you see flowing right out here beside you, that's the Brazos River number 2. You think that this is Brazos River number 1, with number 2 being the canal that was cut by man in the 1920s. Actually, the original Brazos River was known today as Oyster Creek. Now that's a lot. I don't have anything other than the articles I've read and the copies of these articles that I have that substantiates that. They say this coming back, if you can think back this far, the second ice age of the company was one thing that kind of brought this about when the plates underneath the country separated. I've lost my train of thought. This particular area here, as well as Quintana over here, used to be stomping grounds for the Karankawa Indians. So in your archaeological work out here, it's very possible you'll dig up some of the artifacts that had to do with these Indians. I don't know other than about this. I didn't instantly, I'm not a speaker, as you can see. I'm a writer. I write things down. We have in our museum over in Freeport a great number of articles that I have written and made pamphlets out of that are giveaways on just about anything in the area you'd be interested in, like Fort Velasco, the Battle of Velasco, Battle of Quintana, the Battle of Jones Creek, the Surfside's history. I mean, as I've seen it. Incidentally, we had a big hotel in Surfside one time. That's when it was in its heyday. It's set down about where you cross the Intercoastal Canal on your right after you get to Surfside. That burned. It burned, it was rebuilt, and it blew away in a storm. But for some reason or other, it just wasn't meant to be. This was the playground of all of Brazoria County for the plantation owners. And incidentally, did you know back over in Plant A, just across the river from you here on that finger, that used to be a horse racing track. It was called the New World Horse Racing Track. And I have copies of the newspaper from New Orleans where they advertised this track, where they had fine-looking horses and women, so come down and see it.
That was great.
I would like to invite you to our museum if you have a chance to come over. We're having a seminar over there next Saturday by a gentleman that was a photographer in this area in the late 1800s and early 1900s. That he has the photographers of Mr. Reller, the photographs of Mr. Reller that he took of this area. So we're having this seminar over in the museum next Saturday at 9 o'clock.
Okay, well, thank you, and I think, Dorothy, we have other presentations and things, so I'll
Yes.
let you.
Anybody have the time?
It is
10,
11,
10.
10.
$11:10. We are running a little late. One thing, she mentioned the audio tape and the slides, and my sister Candy, who I think is here, I saw her once upon a time. Yeah, there she is back there. She and her husband Robert took the tapes and they have made a PowerPoint of it. That's why the TV is back here. I have it scheduled for right now, but we're running a little bit late, and I see Stephen F. Austin has already arrived.
Okay.
And Stephen F. Austin, of course, played a very important part in keeping all of those folks that fought the Battle of Velasco from being shot for treason. And he's going to tell us his story and his view of the Battle of Velasco and the events preceding and following. And let's give a big hand for Stephen F. Austin. And for y'all. Thank you guys. Y'all did a great job. Even if Larry did say I was mean and
Tenacious.
That's a better word. I had a boss that sent me to let's see, what is that? Assertiveness training. I think he ruined the day.
Mexican politics. It's like a high-crowned road in a rainstorm, and it's got many potholes in it. You don't know when you're going to get pushed off to one side or the other. From the very beginning, Mexico was a diverse group of people who had no idea what government was about. They had been under the Spanish rule all of their lives, didn't know exactly where to go. Yet they managed in 1824 to make the Constitution. And this Constitution had a lot of things that looked like what came from the United States. And as a newcomer myself to this area, trying to get the verification of a grant that my father had started with the Spanish, I ran into a buzzsaw when I went to Mexico City to try to get this taken care of. But I didn't know a bit of Spanish when I went there. But I learned Spanish very quickly and became friends with all of the important figures that were taking part of this drama of making the Constitution. Now finally, President Guerrero was able to survive all of the turmoil and became president. But in 1829, he was deposed, and he lost his life as a result of this disposition. And Bustamante came along and became the president of Mexico. Now he was what we call a centralist. And there were essentially two parties, the Centralist Party and the Federalist Party. Now this was the mainstream of politics in Mexico. Everybody had his own ideas as to how things should be done. And so in all the various provinces, you always had people who were wanting to promote rebellion and line their own pockets, of course. So we have this real boiling pot going on through all this time, in which I became a part of. In 1825, the colonization laws were made by the state of Tamaulipas, or not Tamaulipas, but Coahuila, and made Texas part of that state. Now that capital was in Saltillo. All right. So now these people were these were state people. They were the Federalists. And it's kind of like in the United States, you know, we have the states' rights people, and we have the people who are the nationalists and nationalist government types. We had essentially the same problem in Mexico. Well, now I'm having to, during all this period of time, depending on who was in power, I, as a colonizer, as an impresario, had to kind of walk this slippery road and kind of maintain my interests depending on who was in power and where the tide was rolling at the time. So what happened is that when Bustamante came in, he was a centralist. Guerrero was a federalist in many leanings and had left a lot of the government to the states. Well, the Bustamante decided with Aleman and Tehran, General Tehran is a big player in all of this, decided that they were going to not necessarily change the Constitution of 1824, but to centralize and kind of put more of the power into the federal government rather than into the states. Well, the background behind this is that General Tehran, during the time, he was always a centralist. He did not like what was happening in the colonies. Of course, now remember now that the state government had control over all of this. And he saw what was coming. He didn't like what was going on. He saw that the Americans were coming in and inhabiting this land of Texas. All right. So in 1828, he brings an expedition up here. Well, this expedition looked like it was just like a botanical expedition. They were up here making pictures of flowers and looking at the wildlife. But what he was really doing was counting how many rifles we had, how many Americans were here, and what they thought about the Mexican government. As a person who's looking at things through colored glasses, of course, he took his own interpretation, and in 1829 he made a report back to Guerrero concerning this, which, by the way, never got to him, but the report was made. And he was wanting to put restrictions on the colonists because of the fact he felt that they were growing too strong, and these were all North Americans, and he said eventually these people being from the United States are going to make that part of the United States. He saw that way ahead of time. So after 1829, they decided, well, we're going to make a law, and we're going to restrict what the colonists are able to do. So in April the 6th of 1830, they came out with a law known as the Law of April the 6th, 1830. All right? Now, in this law, there was a number of things that now are going to really get all the colonists up in an uproar. Let me say this. From the time that I began to bring colonists into Texas, my idea was for them to become good citizens, become good Catholics, and to work the land, become prosperous, and be able to live a good life while here in Mexico. But see, to be a good citizen, you had to obey the laws. Well, now, if you all know, y'all being Americans, you know that Americans are not necessarily going to follow the law if it's not in their best interest. And this is exactly what the colonists are doing. So here, I am fighting to keep them doing what the government wants us to do, and the Americans who have their own ideas is what is going to happen. All right, so the Law of April the 6th, 1830 now starts treading on what the American colonists are wanting to do. All right, number one was they were going to build new forts all along the coast, and also to reinforce those garrisons which already existed. As a result, General Tehran was given the position of the general of the eastern interior provinces. Now, if you know, Coahuila in Texas were interior; they were not on the coast. They were the interior provinces, and that was where his main focus was. Well, now, of course, being a centralist in his ideas, he decided that he was going to implement this in the best way he knew how. So he had decreed right away that there be forts put at Velasco and Anahuac and Matagorda and several other places along the coast, and that they were going to bring more troops in. Well, along with this, they were going to conscript some of the Mexican prisoners out of the prisons and their families and bring them up to be part of this. Well, of course, now, what they were supposed to do when they made these forts was, number one, they were going to collect customs on all goods coming from the United States. They wanted to stop all immigration from the United States. There was not in the law itself, but behind all of the centrist ideas was, in fact, both parties, the Federalist and the Centralist Party, both wanted to get rid of slavery. Mexico was anti-slavery from the very beginning. When we brought our people in, when I brought these people in from the United States here to be colonists, who did they bring with them? Yeah, they brought their slaves with them. Because most of these people came from Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and even further east than that. But when they brought their slaves, then they brought that economy with them. All right, so now, if they're going to stop the slave importation, what is that going to do? Well, that's going to get into their pocketbooks, and the colonists didn't like it. So it's up to me to try to get these parts of these laws, I say nullified, except for my colony anyway. And I was able to, number one, get the slave thing to get it taken care of, so that they exempted Texas from the anti-slavery law. Also, I couldn't stop the forts. There was nothing I could do with the forts. So, anyway, so they put the forts in place. And he put a fellow by the name of James Bradburn in charge of these two forts and of the collection of the custom duties at Galveston Bay. And he also appointed a man by the name of Fisher to collect these duties. Well, Fisher decided that he was lazy, and he didn't want to have to be going back between these ports to give the ship's captains their papers and to collect the duties from them. So he says, okay, all you guys that are in Velasco, now you're going to have to go up to Anahuac. You're going to have to collect duties from them up there and get your papers signed so you can go out. Now, it was 100 miles between here and Anahuac. Now, and you know what? There wasn't hardly a trail anywhere along this, and the rest of most of it was swamp, salt grass, and anything else that you could think of, snakes and everything else. And they just didn't want to do it. So what they were doing is the man that was in charge of the fort down here, they would bribe him with money. Well, though of course the bribes kept going up and going up and going up, and finally the guy says, no, we're not going to do this anymore. So in 1831, they had a sloop that came down the river, and they tried to get by the Velasco, and there was shots fired, and one of the Mexican soldiers was killed. Well, boy, I tell you what, now, that did not go well with the Mexican government. Now here I am, I'm a representative, I've been elected representative to go to Saltillo for the state in 1830 when we had an expansion of representatives, and so here now they're starting to look at me. Your people are going into rebellion. And so now I'm having to fight this off as well as trying to get the law of April the 6th taken care of so that we can go ahead and do our business without molestation from the government. Well, that thing's escalated from there, obviously. And as a result, we had Bradburn, who was under orders from General Terran to issue titles, to earn the goodwill of the people at Anahuac and here at Velasco, and to administrate the duties of the laws of April the 6th. Well, Bradburn, as like most people, now he was an American, you know, and of course he was a capitalist in his mind, and he was going to line his own pockets. So instead of doing all of that, what he did was he conscripted the people up there from the colonists. He conscripted their slaves to build the fort and all the buildings in the town around it, and didn't pay them. Not only that, he freed the slaves in that area, and that really started a problem. And as you all know, being in this knowing this area, you know that there was three slaves that came to Louisiana, and he gave them asylum. And of course, Patrick, Jack, and Travis, they didn't like this at all. So what they did is they concocted this story of a force coming to Louisiana to get those slaves back. Well, when that didn't happen, this made Bradburn mad, so he takes and arrests all these people. We got 17 people up there, and this is what foments the whole problem. And you all know what happened after that. We sent people up there with John Austin and tried to get them freed, and that failed. So they came back here and got 3 cannon put on a ship, and of course all the rest is history. Well, so you want to know, well, where was I at all this time? I wasn't here. I was in Matamoros. I had just gotten out of the session at Saltillo, and I had visited General Terran at his battlefield in Tamaulipas. And what happened there was that he was under the gun. Now remember, he's centralist. Santa Anna now was in the picture, and he was taking up the Federalist cause, and he was closing in on Terran. Terran had already suffered a lot of problems, and he was in a position where it was almost untenable for him. He didn't have much ammunition, he didn't have any food, no supplies, and he saw the end coming for him. Well, I went to visit him because I had something else I wanted to talk to him about as far as land was concerned. And he didn't have any rude time for me because he was trying to figure out what he was going to do. Well, after I left him on July the 3rd, he put on his uniform, took his sword, and impaled himself, killed himself. So now General Terran is out of the picture. Well, but his cohorts back up in the Anahuac is not. They're not. And so I am in Matamoros at the time. Now, at the time that I got to Matamoros, Colonel Mejia, who was a Federalist with Santa Anna, he was under Santa Anna, come marching into Matamoros, and he said, I was a curious thing, because it was almost hilarious. As Mejia came in the east side of the city, the government of Matamoros exited the west side of the city. And there was never a shot fired, nothing ever happened, and Mejia took it over. Well, Mejia and I had already been buddies because we knew each other from 1822 when I was in Mexico City. And in fact, his wife had helped get a uniform from New York City for me that I could wear because I was a colonel in the Mexican militia. Well, so Mejia decided he was going to go back up and quell this disturbance and stop this nonsense that was going on at Anahuac and Velasco. Because they'd heard about the battle fight. It was 2 weeks afterwards. The battle happened on June the 26th. It got up to us on July the 10th. And Mejia says, well, I've got 5 ships. I got 400 men. Let's go take care of this situation. You want to go with me? And I said, well, of course. I had to go up there and I had to do something right quick because we were about to get ourselves in big trouble. Well, so we get on the ship. 2 days later, we're at the mouth of the Brazos, right out here at Fort Velasco. And as soon as we got off the boat, I sent dispatches out to everybody. Make sure that you have made a statement for Santa Anna and that you're for him. Well, it just so happens that it was already that has already had happened because the Turtle Bio resolutions essentially said, hey, we're pronouncing for Santa Anna. And who was involved with that? My good old distant cousin, John Austin. And when he came back here, that was the temper that they'd already was already taking. So my take is that, well, hey, if we can get them to go for Santa Anna, we get our Federalist leanings back, and everything is back to normal. And so I was much relieved when I got here and found out that everything was pretty well taken care of. Bradburn had been run out of his position. Colonel Piedras had come down from Nacogdoches with his group, sided with the settlers, released Patrick, Jack, and Travis, and all the 17 others that were incarcerated. Well, there was more than that was incarcerated, but the 17 that he had taken when had the Indian problem, the slavery problem, and so everything up there was back to where it was supposed to be. Now remember, even at that, we still have got the custom duties from the United States. That never did go away. And remember that even though all of this had gone now, I still have got these problems that are going to be confronting me. Eventually, I get these articles of April the 6th, 1830, completely voided out. But that didn't happen until 1834, and Santa Anna was the one that did that. Interesting, isn't it? Okay. So anyway, now what do we have? We, as a result of all the goodwill that was Mejia and I went to Brazoria, and we had a big party, a big ball. And there we all toasted each other, and we all made buddy-buddy, and I was happy as I could be, and everybody liked me again. Because see, there were two parties that were forming here in this area. The War Dogs, headed by John Austin, and William H. Horton, Three-Legged Willie, and Britt Bailey, and a number of others in this area around Brazoria. Now the conservatives, or my group, which were were against any type of revolution, were more centered around San Felipe, which was the center of the colony. Okay, so these two people now, all of a sudden, yeah, we're kind of looking at each other with the same eyeballs. Now, you want to know how I personally feel about those situations? Up until this time, when we've got this when we got the problem with Anahuac and Velasco, I was wanting for sure to make sure that the Mexican government and the colonists got along, and everyone did what they were supposed to do: obey the Mexican law and prosper, and that way everything be fine. But you got to understand, the politicians in Mexico were not going to let it sit. So now I am starting to change my mind at this time because of this incursion into our lives, was really wasn't warranted. We now have doubts as to what is the Mexican government really up to? What are they going to do next? If they're going to do this to us now, what are they going to do next? So we, in the next few days after this, in the next months, we start talking about petitioning state to become a separate state of Texas, and just separating from Coahuila. Well, that didn't work. That's not a situation that went over well with people of Coahuila. Well, we're getting all their taxes from us and all that money. They're not going to clip off their source of revenue. So later on, we decided we're going to go to the national government. In 1833, guess what? I'm the one that's been told that I got to go down there and present this. I went down there, beat my head against the wall for almost